J.D. Vance yesterday spoke at a Turning Point event that Erica Kirk also spoke, and it was a moving night. It was a sold-out crowd, and J.D. Vance said something I thought that was very, very important. And I think it's important to start the show with this based on where we're going and what we learned about the size and scope of Operation Arctic Frost. Here's something J.D. Vance said yesterday to the Turning Point crew down there, and I believe they were in Mississippi, if memory serves, in number 28.
Here's something that I want every conservative to remember. It's an important part of my entire political philosophy is we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. The left is already going to do it regardless of whether we do it. That is the takeaway of the last 40 years.
Now, I realize that the Peggy Noonans of the world, that gives them heart palpitations. Eddie, how does that land with you? The left is going to do what the left is going to do, and if we restrain ourselves based on, well, if the left gets in office and does this, we're going to get payback. Should that be our operating standard anymore? J.D. Vance says no. We can't worry about what the left might do to us later, because trust me when I tell you, if they get power, they're coming and they're going to do it. They've already shown they will and can and have. So we can't be stopped from doing what we know is right or needs to be done with the fear that the Democrats may pull it in kind. You agree with Vance there?
Chris, this is one of my favorite things that a Republican has ever said in politics. I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm glad to hear it.
If ever there were evidence for what J.D. Vance just said, it is what we discovered yesterday. And the senators on Capitol Hill were fit to be tied over this. In fact, before I get into the specifics of it, let me give you a couple of senators talking about this. First, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Operation Arctic Frost, Judge Boasberg, the partisanship from the judiciary, the spying on senators. Actually, let's go with Senator Schmidt first in number 24, if you please. Number 24.
Judge Boasberg gave a speech about how he was going to thwart the Trump agenda before he got those cases. He was not the assignment judge. The D.C. courts have a daily assignment judge. He wasn't the assignment judge. He's on vacation. Somehow gets these cases at 1 in the morning. Was he tipped off? Did somebody tell him these cases against President Trump and his agenda now were coming? I don't know. We should find that out. But Judge Boasberg, what he did to Senator Cruz and maybe other senators, absolutely, and I don't say this lightly, absolutely is worthy of impeachment proceedings. There has to be accountability. The American people have heard a lot about this, and you're going to hear more. We should have Watergate-style hearings on this for months. If we're ever going to root this out, we have to be serious about it, and consequences have to follow. Resignations, firings, criminal prosecutions. You simply can't, in this country, use the justice system to throw people in jail because they have a red jersey on or a blue jersey on.
What's he talking about? Ted Cruz lays it out in more specificity in number 23.
I am right now calling on the House of Representatives to impeach Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg put his robe down, stood up and said, "Sign me up to be part of the partisan vendetta against 20% of the Republicans in the Senate." That is a dereliction of duty and a violation of the judicial oath. And I want to thank Chairman Grassley and Chairman Johnson for pursuing this tenaciously like a dog on a bone. We are going to get the answers of every person who signed off on this abuse of power, and mark my words, there will be accountability for these zealots who wanted to corrupt the Department of Justice and corrupt the judiciary in order to try to attack their enemies list.
Reading this from the Washington Times, new documents expose the Biden DOJ's fishing expedition into Trump and Republicans during the 2024 race. Jaw-dropping whistleblower documents made public yesterday show that the Biden Justice Department secretly cast a massive investigatory net over the Republican Party, and much of the surveillance appeared to be triggered by Donald Trump's announcement of his third attempt to run for president. That press conference yesterday where senators lined up to denounce what an unidentified whistleblower had uncovered, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and his legal team under something called Operation Arctic Frost issued 197 different subpoenas seeking records and communications of more than 430 individuals and organizations, all of whom were Republican. Those targeted include Stephen Miller, Dan Scavino, Jared Kushner, and Laura Trump, who all worked in the first Trump administration, of course, and on the Trump campaign. Additional subpoenas issued to individuals and businesses seeking statistical data and analysis related to Republican fundraising and individual communications, with a slew of national media outlets, including CBS and Fox News. Phone records of 11 members of Congress were also secretly subpoenaed. Arctic Frost was the vehicle by which FBI agents and DOJ prosecutors could improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus, said Chuck Grassley of the committee. The whistleblower documents exposed the zeal within the Smith investigation to nail Mr. Trump with criminal wrongdoing more than 2 years after January 6th. In March 23 email exchanges about the riot, Mr. Smith, Deputy J.P. Cooney asked Jack Smith, can we do some work to nail down Trump's role in this? A month after Mr. Cooney's email, subpoenas covering hundreds of Republican-related entities began flowing. Mr. Smith sought records from Apple for one unidentified person seeking communications with any member, employee, or agent of the legislative branch or government. Another subpoena to an unidentified individual sought records relating to communications with several national media companies. Subpoenas issued to banks, individuals, and businesses sought records of many of Trump's allies and White House aides. One subpoena was denied. It was issued to Texas-based AT&T seeking the records of the cell phone owned by Ted Cruz. And that's where Boasberg came in. I've got more on this coming up. As J.D. Vance said, if you think the Democrats won't do whatever they got to do to make sure Republicans never see the light of day again, they'll do it when they're in power. Barack Obama saying the quiet part out loud. You know, not just weaponizing the DOJ and the FBI and the judiciary and subpoenas to spy, surveil Republicans, but they are hell-bent on control of messaging, information. We may have to break out the montage again. We could add this one to it, number 33, if you please.
Part of what we're going to have to do is to start experimenting with new forms of journalism and how do we use social media in ways that reaffirm facts, separate facts from opinion. We want diversity of opinion. We don't want diversity of facts. That, I think, is one of the big tasks of social media. By the way, it will require some government, I believe, some government regulatory constraints around some of these business models in a way that's consistent with the First Amendment, but that also says, look, there is a difference between these platforms letting all voices be heard versus a business model that elevates the most hateful voices or the most polarizing voices or the most dangerous in the sense of inciting violence voices. And that I think is going to be a big challenge for all of us that we're going to have to undertake.
Cue J.D. Vance one more time. Number 28, please, Paul.
Here's something that I want every conservative to remember. It's an important part of my entire political philosophy is we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. The left is already going to do it regardless of whether we do it. That is the takeaway of the last 40 years.
We're going to have to add that Obama clip to the montage, the already 3-minute long montage, which we have in the vault, kept at the ready. I may have to revisit it. That there. In addition to what I just read about Arctic Frost off the top of the show today, that from Barack Obama, a pledge effectively a pledge that when Democrats get, we're going to have to do something, he says. You know, people can have their voice, people can have their opinion, but we cannot have divergent sets of facts. Because don't you see, Democrats get to determine what the facts are. And we're going to have to call up these social media companies and say, hey, you're elevating people who have a different set of facts than we do. You remember that I just told you, we were talking about this yesterday with Gordon Chang. I think I had the story last week. China, right now, is shutting down anyone in social media, particularly young people. They're looking to silence and even punish anyone they find on social media in China that's lamenting their economy, lamenting work, lamenting a work ethic. If they catch anybody in China on social media belly aching about a lack of work or quality work or not really wanting to make money or, you know, screw all that hard labor stuff, I'm done, I'm going to kick back and relax and enjoy life a little bit. Xi Jinping at present is cracking down on anyone who is not effusive in their love for work and having children and raising a family and being productive, and we are all happy and we are all smiles because, I suppose, Xi Jinping could say, that's a fact. A successful country is when everybody is all smiles and working hard and being productive and having children, and anybody saying the contrary is, well, they're operating on a different set of facts, I guess. Can you imagine if Barack Obama and the Democrats get control again, what they'll do to your speech? And I'm not kidding when I say, based on Arctic frost, based on things like that from Barack Obama, I'm not kidding you when I say I could imagine a day where I would not only be yanked off of this show, but perhaps even criminally liable through some creative charges from the DOJ. I don't think that's a stretch. So when J.D. Vance says they're going to do it, they're coming, so restraining ourselves, restraining peeks under the hood, restraining ourselves from impeaching these activist judges, that's stupid. Because you say, well, the Democrats are coming and they'll do it too. Yeah, they already have, and they will. That can't be an impediment to our seeking justice while we control the levers of power. Barack Obama, one more time, I'm not going to play this entire thing, but I do think every now and again it's important to just kind of hit pause and remember who these people are. We're enjoying some high cotton right now. I mean, Donald Trump is on the move, and it looks like he scored another deal with China today. We'll get into that in more detail coming up. But it's just important to hit reset and remember who these people are and what they would do if they had control and what they did when they had control. One more time, number 33 from yesterday at something called the Connecticut Forum or some such thing. It doesn't matter. Any of these think tanks where he's paid tons of money to show up and say, when we get back into control, we got to do something about the way people speak freely on social media.
Part of what we're going to have to do is to start experimenting with new forms of journalism and how do we use social media in ways that reaffirm facts, separate facts from opinion. We want diversity of opinion. We don't want diversity of facts. That, I think, is one of the big tasks of social media. By the way, it will require some government, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do believe it will require some kind of government. We're going to add that to this montage. I call it the free speech montage. Democrats, never forget who they are and what they believe about your ability to even speak freely. Never mind vote for people who oppose their points of view. Roll it.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes.
We're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation.
Not carrying his remarks live because, frankly, he says a lot of things that are not true and sometimes potentially dangerous.
Because of the splintering of the media, we almost occupy different realities.
And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today.
We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
I mean, basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
So far, he's just giving his normal list of grievances. We don't consider that necessarily newsworthy, and there's a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things.
Our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence.
At some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members.
If you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely...
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful.
But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda, and whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrent.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation, and that has to stop.
How do we return to that common conversation? How can we have a common set of facts?
So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
Never forget who these people are. As J.D. Vance said, when they're in control, they will stop at nothing, as Arctic frost has just demonstrated, and we'll spend some more time on that. These people will stop at nothing to remain in perpetual power, including abusing the judiciary, including silencing your speech, and forcing, through force of law or threat, social media companies to keep your voice and mine from being elevated. We're on notice. They're telling us who they are. This Operation Arctic Frost and what happened with Biden's DOJ fishing expedition. Again, the Jack Smith investigation into January 6th was wide-reaching. It encompassed some 430 different individuals and organizations, all of whom were Republican. Specifically when it got to Ted Cruz. Jack Smith was seeking records from Apple for one unidentified person seeking communications with any member, employee, or agent of the legislative branch of government. Another subpoena to an unidentified individual sought records relating to communications with several national media companies. Subpoenas issued to banks, individuals, and businesses sought the records of many of Mr. Trump's allies and White House aides. One subpoena, however, was denied. And this is where Cruz specifically was involved and why he was so white-hot yesterday. One subpoena was denied, issued to Texas-based AT&T, seeking the records of the cell phone owned by Ted Cruz. So AT&T said no, to their credit. We're not going to hand over the cell phone records of Senator Ted Cruz. They cited the speech and debate clause of the Constitution, correctly. The law requires AT&T to notify Mr. Cruz of the subpoena, but the company was silenced by a secret court order handed down by Judge Boasberg. And this loathsome little toad we're going to get into with more specificity as the show goes on. He has had his sticky little hands all over some of the worst judicial rulings and decisions and fiats in the last few years, stymieing Trump at every turn. Mr. Cruz, appearing at the press conference Wednesday, waved Judge Boasberg's order in front of reporters and read it aloud. Quote, "The court finds reasonable grounds to believe such a disclosure will result in destruction of or tampering with evidence, intimidation of potential witnesses, and serious jeopardy to the investigation." So do you hear this? Jack Smith wanted to spy on Ted Cruz. They called up AT&T and said, give us Cruz's phone records. AT&T said, no, we're not doing that. And by the way, we need to let Ted Cruz know you want his phone records. And they said, oh, no, you don't. And Boasberg issued a court order saying AT&T could not notify Mr. Cruz because there are reasonable grounds to believe you telling him we want to look at his phone records will lead him to destroy phone records. Now, fast Eddie, that alone, setting aside the other 429 individuals and organizations that Jack Smith was surveilling, many of whom were Republicans on Capitol Hill, just this one storyline. Let's look at Ted Cruz's phone records. AT&T hand them over. AT&T says no. And by the way, we're going to tell Ted Cruz you're looking. They said, no, you're not. We got a court order that says you're not, because if you do, we have reason to believe he'll destroy records. Don't you dare tell him. Your reaction to a United States senator being potentially surveilled by a cell phone company, compelled by the government to do so, they fight it and say, we're not gonna, and then a court order says, don't you dare tell him, or else. What your reaction as a United States citizen? Now, if they can do that to a United States senator, imagine what they do to you and me.
Absolutely, and that's why I want accountability immediately. I don't think that this can wait to go through congressional hearings and all this nonsense that takes a long, drawn-out process. Yes, due process for everybody all around, but at the same time, people need to be brought in immediately. This goes back to, Chris, that case where, remember, the FBI was trying to tap into an iPhone, and Apple said no, right? And at the time, we had that debate. We said, should the FBI be able to tap into anybody's iPhone? And the ultimate conclusion is no. This is unacceptable, but there needs to be accountability moved forward, and quickly. This can't happen.
One more time, Ted Cruz on this yesterday, number 23, his reaction to this.
I am right now calling on the House of Representatives to impeach Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg put his robe down, stood up, and said, sign me up to be part of the partisan vendetta against 20% of the Republicans in the Senate. That is a dereliction of duty and a violation of the judicial oath. And I want to thank Chairman Grassley and Chairman Johnson for pursuing this tenaciously like a dog on a bone. We are going to get the answers of every person who signed off on this abuse of power, and mark my words, there will be accountability for these zealots who wanted to corrupt the Department of Justice and corrupt the judiciary in order to try to attack their enemies list.
Back to what J.D. Vance said. I know Republicans are scared to death of impeaching judges. They're scared. Ed, they're scared. They don't want to do it because they think that that's a politically untenable thing to do. We do that, and that's really going to make us pay. Remember what J.D. Vance said. Remember his advice. Don't not do something because you're afraid the Democrats will do it later. They're always going to do it later. They just will. Doesn't matter whether you restrain yourselves or not.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.